We'll talk about musical things, but in the context.
That's correct, in the context of production. So even if you're not a tech side of things, you can still ask any production side, writing. He does all this. He plays multiple instruments, produces a lot of different stuff. He's going to show you some live sessions, how he does it, what he does, and all that kind of stuff. Even, talk about your signal chain. Yeah. Is that cool? Yeah. So as people start filing in, just kind of keep coming all around. Yeah.
Yeah, come on in, all the way in here. Up as close as you can is probably helpful.
Hello. This is recorded.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Come on in, guys. Filing on down.
Is that how it's work?
Okay, good. Everybody settled in? Okay, so I'm going to let Keith introduce kind of what he's going to talk about first. He's got some finale files and obviously approachable sessions. So what are you going to start with first?
Well, I'm going to figure out what this pinwheel of death is doing. Let's see.
Are you showing the tour one first?
Well, I don't know if the other guys are in here yet. Are they?
Is Jazz here?
Jazz will be coming out at 2.
At
Okay,
2?
perfect. Then I'll save that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then the theory class is...
Theory class is here. So,
Perfect.
So you know,
Okay.
theory class, production class.
Yeah, so, I'm really excited about this. I've done lots of clinics and lots of master classes, but I've never opened up a session and kind of shown you around some things. So, I am probably a typical look into the music industry now, and that I do a handful of different things on different days. And I think one thing that's different than maybe it used to be 30 years ago is there's far fewer specialists than there used to be, and or just singular specialists. Now, more of us have 2 or 3 specialties. It's not that you can get away with being average at all of them. You truly have to be exceptional at least one, probably 2 or 3. So, and luckily you've got resources like YouTube and great educational institutions and things to teach you things. But so I do a combination. I tour as a musician, as a multi-instrumentalist with Toby Mac, and that's kind of a newer thing. I never really set out to be a touring musician, but it's kind of a fun thing that I do. And then I produce music and write songs for people, and those things kind of blur into each other sometimes. And then as a horn player, I always wanted to be an arranger. Back since I was just a little kid, I wanted to be a composer and arranger. And so I didn't even know what a producer was. I just knew they're arrangers, and they wrote stuff on pages, and people played it, and it got recorded. And then I realized that on a professional level, that's a producer, in the context of pop music and different kinds of recorded music. So the first recording I ever did was in college, and I was like, hey, I'll call all these musicians and I'll record this song. And I had a friend who was a radio programmer, and I said, dude, come produce this song for me. And I showed up, and he said, hey, I am happy to be here, but you're producing the song. I don't know if you knew that. I'm like, what do you mean? I didn't know them. Yeah, the producers, is the one kind of arranging and working with the musicians in the band. Oh, well, I guess I am kind of producing this then. That's when I realized what a producer was. And so, and then there's so much more than just the creative side of producing. There's the working well with artists and the administrative side. And it can be so little, and it can be so broad. It means a lot. It could probably be more of a musical director if you were going to equate it to film. Musical director would probably be more of an apt title for it. So what I've done is I've brought you a song that I've been producing for Tasha. And it's going to be a radio single that'll be going to radio on the 18th. And this was really unique. It's a really unique one to show you because it shows a lot of different reasons that popular music exists and for what format does it exist. And actually, I wasn't planning on this, but what I'll do is I'll actually show you a bit of the recorded version, and then I want to show you the album version, rather.
Let's do an AV.
Yeah, because I can show you the reason why all these different versions exist, and that actually is a really interesting thing to show you. So this is the version of the song that we put on the record. I'll play a minute of it, maybe. Yeah, pump that up real good.
When I can't catch my breath, pressed on every side, when all I want is rest from burdens in this life, lift up my head. Look me in the eyes and tell me I am yours. I am safe here. Let down my guard, fall in your arms and stay here. I'm not gonna move, 'cause when I'm with you I'm safe. Though I am broken, I know that I am safe. So safe.
Then I'll move ahead, so there's this, then it gets bigger, and there's this like saxophone symphony. Okay, so you've got that. This is the version for the record, kind of an 80s treatment, synthesizers and saxophones, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, you put sax in your music. So then, oftentimes when you're putting out a record, there's support material and stuff that you'll do. You'll see acoustic versions of songs, or you'll see lyric videos and things. And so we went in at Trevecca University, and we did 3 songs. One of them was Safe Here. And we just wanted it to be this really cool, like, ambient electric guitar and voice was the picture of this song. And, when you're recording, we've got the engineers backstage, and he's got headphones on, with a recording rig. And the guitar player is using a Kemper, and so you don't hear any amp. And so we start sound checking this song, and all I hear in the room is Tasha start to sing the first verse. And it's just this really cool, it's so cool with no instruments behind it. And so the song starts with just voice. So I'll play you a couple seconds of this.
You just posted this too, didn't you?
This has been out for a little while, but you're
My name is
watching
Scott
that
Harrison.
first. This is awesome.
Just listen. This is
I
my
can
wife,
skip it now.
my
Okay,
son,
there you go.
and my...
When I can't catch my breath, pressed on every side, when all I want is rest from burdens in this life, lift up my head. Look me in the eyes and tell me I am yours. I am safe here. Let down my guard, fall in your arms and stay here. I'm not gonna move, 'cause when I'm with you I'm safe. Though I am broken, I know that I am safe. So safe.
Okay, so very few things can illustrate like the job of a producer better than those 2 different approaches. It's so different. It's haunting. I once heard a version of "Girls Just Want to Have Fun," which is this '80s pop tune, and it was done as the piano ballad in minor, and it totally made this girls just want to have fun. That's really awesome. It's like, girls just want to have fun. That's, it like totally changed the tone of what the song was. All the lyrics you saw them so differently. And so that's what this version did. And what happened was, this was one of our favorite songs on the record. But we put this out, and we had several big radio stations call and say, you have to put this song out. Like, this song's so beautiful. And it didn't happen until we put this version out. And so, but the verse, that version in and of itself, just electric guitar and just vocal, doesn't really work on radio. So how do we create something on radio that keeps the spirit of that, but is also a full production thing? So what we ended up with, I'll play you a bit of the radio version, and then I'll break it down. So here's kind of the in-between.
When I can't catch my breath, pressed on every side, when all I want is rest from burdens in this life, lift up my head, look me in the eyes and tell me I am yours. I am safe here. Let down my guard, fall in your arms and stay here. I'm not gonna move, 'cause when I'm with you I'm safe. Though I am broken, I know that I am safe. So safe. I don't have to try. I'm effortlessly yours. There's no need to fight. Help me trust you, Lord. I am safe. Let down my guard, fall in your arms and stay here. I'm not gonna move, 'cause when I'm with you I'm safe. Though I'm broken.
That's the kind of in-between. So a couple things about that is we use the exact same electric guitar and the exact same vocal for that version from the acoustic version. So, because it was like the vocal was stunning, and it really was. We did 4 takes live in the room while they were recording the vocal, and Tasha did 3 of them, and she said, okay, I'm in my head a little bit, just you pretend like nobody's here. And the 4th take, it was just like stunning. There was just something in the room, something special, and we all just kind of sat there like silent after it was done. Cool guys. So the vocal on this version, that acoustic version, is like one pass straight through. The electric guitar is unedited. Her vocal is tuned a little bit, but it's just really stunning. So I even tried for this version re-recording the electric guitar and like tightening it up and making sure it's clean, and it just sounded so dead and lifeless to the other. So and I noticed that out of like things like Ed Sheeran. If you're listening, there's a lot of things that are real punchy and tight, like the kick drum and snare drum and the bass. But there's always something very imperfect in it, something very out of time. A lot of times the acoustic guitars just kind of move, and that's one of the questions you had asked me was like, what's one of my pet peeves in music? And it's the lack of a human touch to things. And so sometimes you can keep things like really punching hard with things like your low end and drums, and then other things can kind of float on top. And so that's a really interesting balance to hit, but
Well, you don't know those other things are floating if they don't have that foundation. If that makes sense.
yeah, totally. And too, like I say that what sounds weird is a track that's perfectly edited, really tight, and then a vocal that's loose and sounds poorly performed. Like in songwriting it's called prosody, where like a minor nature of a lyric or of a melody matches a sad lyrical content. There's good prosody in that. And so the same thing goes here. If you have a track that's perfectly tight and a loose vocal, something sounds off. Either the track sounds too perfect or the vocal sounds. But you listen to a Chris Stapleton record and all of it's kind of imperfect, and all of a sudden those imperfections sound really beautiful. And so anyway, so here's the session. This was a really hard thing to produce because I had half the people going, it's not pretty enough, it's not simple enough like the acoustic version. And then I had all the radio folks going, it's not big enough. So I had to try to find a way to, I worked so hard on this for that reason, trying to get it right and trying to get it to serve every purpose that it was meant for. And so, you know, as a producer, you're not serving yourself. You're not making albums for yourself. You want to take pride in it, but ultimately this is a service industry like anything else. And you're serving the artist, and to serve the record labels, and to serve the radio people, and serve management. And sometimes the hardest job is trying to get everybody on the same page there. So one thing that's really cool about this is the guy who mixed this, his name's Andrew Whooper, and he mixed Sorry for Justin Bieber, which was a really cool thing to do. And the label didn't want to pay that much money, and so we paid for it ourselves because we thought it was important, and I thought it was really cool. So anyway, so we've got a session with so and so many tracks.
So break down that session. Just gonna talk about them just a little bit.
Yeah, I'll tell you what's going on here. I've got all these purple are drums, and these are kick drums, 4 kick drums blended together, doing the exact same thing. And I'll talk through these, but I'll just walk through. The farther down the drums you get, the more like effects and things that, you know, transition effects and builds and this and that. The orange are bass instruments. All these are different kind of synths and 808s. There's no live bass in this. Blue are all the keyboards. So you've got piano up here at the top, and then you go down here to more synth stuff. Green are guitars. And sometimes the fact that there's 2 tracks doesn't necessarily mean that there's 2 parts. This first track is the live guitar, and then this second track here is some studio effects and things that I did to it to kind of dirty it up. So I call them optional, and I separated it out in case the mixer saw a better picture or something else he might do to it. It's easily pliable. So this is only one part. There's only really 3, I guess 2 electric guitars here or 3, and an acoustic guitar thing that happened in the chorus. These other blue, these are strings, live strings. A guy named Brandon Collins did these. Brandon and I have been friends since I worked at Saddleback Church in California, and he was a musician there, but he grew up with the cellist from One Republic, and so he's now come into being the first call string and choir guy for Ryan Tedder, who's the biggest producer in the world, and so he's worked for U2 and Paul McCartney and One Republic and Jonas Brothers, and Tasha Layton, which I'm sure is at the top of his. So it's been really cool, and that's one of the things I would say is going to be really fun for y'all, like coming up together, making music together, elevating each other. It's not so much that one person goes off and separates from the rest. I mean, certainly that happens, but you know, you kind of realize that you're kind of coming up with other people who are going to do great things too. You have no idea what you all are going to accomplish together. So these yellow, I always like the lead vocal to stand out. So these are Tasha's vocals here. And same thing, these 2 tracks right here are the exact same vocal. So they're copied and then processed differently. And I'll explain kind of what that's doing, but this is just really one track. These are background vocals here. These are 4 stacks of this background vocal that I try to give as few tracks to the mixer as possible. If I know I want these vocals to sound exactly like they do, I print them and send them to him. There's no need to give him. He's not going to take a week on your track, but I spent months on this track, so, you know, to ask him to redo something, he might he might spend 10 minutes on this background vocal track, and I spent a couple hours. And so if he comes back, man, I don't really like the sound of that, then I go back and reprint it, and he can do something with it. Same, this is another background vocal part that is also 4 stacked. And these background vocal parts, they get there's 4 of them, so there's 2 in the left and 2 in the right, nothing down the center. For those of you who want to do music production, your center image is the most valuable real estate in your whole song, and that is reserved for vocals and a select few other things. You've got your low end that's in the center, and then you've got the vocal, and then, you know, a snare drum sometimes. And other than that, like that's for the vocal. And so, you know, Tasha was talking about Katy Perry and her work with her, and so the breakdown for a pop vocal is in the verse. There will oftentimes be one lead vocal. It's just like a solo vocal. You can hear all the emotion, all the inflections. Then if there's a harmony, it's either a single harmony, and maybe it might be down the center, but it also might be just off to the side. So you don't hear it like way over there, but there's a single one. Or maybe you have, and then the pre-chorus, you might still have that single lead vocal right in the center. And then you might have just one left and right background vocal. You know, maybe they're the same part, maybe they're separate parts, you know, a 3-part harmony thing. And then the chorus, oftentimes the lead vocal is stacked 3 times. So you have the one in the center, and then they kind of recorded the lead vocal also, one in the left and one in the right. So you have this width to the vocal, and the left and rights are tucked up underneath. However stacked and pop you want it is how loud you tend to make it. But there's still that one in the center, that's the focal point. And then the background vocals tend to be, with pop music, tend to be stacked 4 times. Sometimes they'll do 3, but again, then you're putting one right in the center with the other. And like I said, that's the lead vocal spot. So left, left, right, right. Then you start stacking background vocals around it, you know, but still right in that center, that's the vocal spot. And so that's kind of the formula for vocal tracking and when to stack and things. And the more organic you want something to be, the less you edit it perfectly, and the fewer stacks you make it, you know, the more human you make it. If I were in the room listening to this, what would I do? Well, it'd probably be they hired background vocalists, and maybe there's 3 of them, but they all sang at once. You know, there's one lead vocalist. Like, you know, the more human you want it to sound, think more in terms of what you would want it to be if you were listening to it in the room. The more pop you want it to be, or synthetic, the more you start playing with effects that are inhuman and stacking and tightening things, you know, going too far. So anyway, and then down here I have some very minimal additional vocal effects. And then one optional effects. This is something that I spent some time on, getting it to sound the way it did. And so I'm giving that to him separately. He can either use or not use, depending on what his vision for it is. So, any questions so far? I'll start breaking this down a little bit. Who in here are kind of songwriters? Songwriters, who's interested in like record production? Maybe want to do that, session musician or producing. I would say everyone who wants to be a session musician, you're going to act in some form as a producer. You're producing your own part. And that's where you have producers who, their job is to kind of guide the emotion in the room. And they hire these 5 or 6 musicians who are producers in their own right and really smart. And you say, I want it to sound like this. And the vocalist sings great in this key, and I think it's in this tempo. Here's a little scratch recording of the acoustic I did. What do you think we should do? And it kind of becomes production by community.
Many voices.
Yeah, and that's okay. And you learn how to respect the person in charge while also giving your feedback, and it can be really fun like that. And then they're in there saying, it just doesn't feel right yet. It doesn't feel like it's big enough in the chorus. And everyone's saying, here's what I'm going to do to make it big in the chorus. Or it sounds too busy. And the electric guitar player says, I know I played a lot in that second verse, so I'm going to back it off. And things like that.
Well, that happened on the Nate station that you and I were on. Nate. So we recorded together on a session. And
that's how we met.
Yeah, that's how we met. But Nate, the guy, the artist, actually had asked to write so many charts, but he didn't have a song with charts. So you and me and Tyler just wrote the charts right there on the fly. We
Yeah.
just listened to it, and he was kind of driving the bus, saying, "Hey, let's do this here, and how about you do this, and we'll stack it here."
Yeah, and it's a different thing at that point than coming in. And then there are producers who slave in front of a computer for hours and hours and come up with a track. Sometimes they're coming up with a track that has no melody to it, and later on they'll write a track to it. I don't really like that so much. I really like producing to a song. And so sometimes the demos that we come up with while we're writing a song are very basic, and then later on I go back and look for something really special to work for the song. So here's a look at these kick drums. How about that? We'll do this.
Just break it down, kind of start it and solo things out, and start stacking it, so you can hear all the different elements.
Yeah, so here's the kick drum in the first chorus. There's only 2 of them rolling. And here's the one, lot of low end. It's a little more front end, but a little more room sound. So there's 4 of them or 2 of them right here, because they're each doing something very different and adding something to the kick drum. And I went in here very carefully and made sure there was no phasing between the 2 of them, and made sure that they lined up perfectly. Your biggest enemy in music production and in recording drums is phasing. If you get phasing right, and make sure, if you don't know what that is, look it up. But if you get the phasing right, you can do a lot wrong and stuff still sounds right. But your low end's the first to go. So then we come in here to the chorus. A little more power to them.
It's more slapping.
Yeah. So, like I said, we've showed you those first 2. So here's, almost sounds like a cajon, kind of. It's got a lot of, there's some grit in it. Sounds like a big bass drum in a warehouse, which is probably big room, kick big room is what that's called. Check my buffers. They're all samples. I don't remember how I put these together necessarily. Well, I do now. I put them together. I put one in and copied it, and then found while that one was playing, I have this piece of software called ASDR Sample Manager or whatever, and it allows me to search through all my different samples really quickly. So I go and search for kick, or I have a folder full of ones that I like, and while that first one's playing, I go through and check for another one that is doing something different. First thing, this is a good tip for y'all. Decide what you want to do mentally ahead of time. Far too many people go and twist a knob, wanting to find, hearing there's a problem, and instead of deciding what to do with it, they just start moving knobs. What I'm suggesting is just like a math problem for you to decide, here's the problem I hear, how am I going to solve that? I think that the kick is too muddy, and that frequency is probably 250 or so. Then go try out your theory. And I'm going to dip it down by 3 dB, and I think that's going to fix it. And then go test your theory. Yes, that did fix it. That's how you train yourself to find the solutions. Moving knobs is not going to train you how to do that. You're going to overdo it or take 3 moves to to fix the problem that could have taken 1 move to make. So this is my main kick. Let's see what I think of this. It's a lot of low end. I like the low end, but it's missing something. So I don't know that this is the one I came to next. Probably not, because that doesn't solve it. It was probably something like that I found. Oh yeah, that does it. I can hear that bass drum now. And I probably wanted to sound more organic, more human, more like somebody played it. Again, some of those, I really like Ed Sheeran, because there's so much humanness in it, even when there's something programmed or not played by a human. It tends to have something like this big roomy drum in it that makes it feel like it. So
how are you using those? Can you show your faders in the mix of all 3 of those?
Yeah, they're probably all just straight up.
Are they straight?
Virtually, but then again, so here's the kick drums. It's lying a little bit because sometimes I'll go and reprint them. I might have put a plug-in on them, and I do a lot of committing. You know, you can leave options and options for days, and sometimes that's not a good thing. So if I pick something and I know I like it, I get this, so there's no plugins up here, but there might have been at one point, and I went ahead and printed them.
So that's the final.
Yeah, because I don't want to lose my faders and all of a sudden my blends that I liked or worked so hard to get are gone. So the second thing I would have done is find my backbeat or my snare drum or something like that. So those are down here. Groove is so important. You know, especially in pop music, if you get the drums right and feeling great, you can do kind of virtually anything. And after that, if you get your low end right, you can do virtually anything, you know. So I spent a lot of time there. So yeah, this clank here, which has a reverb on it, this clap here, real dry and in your face, and then the snap that's on it. So it's a little misleading when you hear people talk, oh my gosh, like music now has like 250 tracks and it's so overkill. And that may or may not be the case sometimes, but you know, I've got 4 kick drums, but it's really just 1 kick drum. You know, there's 4 stereo tracks, but your brain isn't perceiving 4 different things going on. You hear one thing going on. And you know, I may or may not at times, because these are all so different, these sounds are so different, and I might hear he may widen the sound of one. One of them has a lot of reverb on it, or he has a better reverb he might put on it that's cleaner sounding or dirtier sounding. I leave them separate, but like if it was 3 different claps that had different frequency ranges, but like I love them, I know this is the blend I want, I print them into one. So let me start showing you kind of the top end of these drums.
Any questions?
Yeah, anything while I'm doing this?
I do kind of have a question. 'Cause
Yeah.
I noticed you have like all the drums like spread stereo like to both ends.
Mhm.
Like is that like to get like a wide effect from the drums? And then if you're using like on a kit or something, does that always work, or is that something?
No. Well, like I said, your center, there's some kind of conventions that you can use, and that's normally when you kick and snare center. And most people only have 1 sub. So one thing that I do often is there's this plugin called Shed Spread, and it will widen things and dirty things up. Like you use them for like rock guitars, but they also have this crossover that takes anything below this point and turns it mono. So even when the synth bass sound is supposed to sound wide, under 80 hertz, it still translates into mono. Because there's no need for stereo stuff down there, because it's almost everyone just has one sub. So I do that for them and things. So by having that stereo, it may be a mono sound, but it's just recorded to a stereo track. Okay. So one of these claps may be just a mono thing, but then one of them has stereo reverb on it, things like that. So it's some of them is because I want them wide, and some of them is because I want them centered. But because they're recorded on the stereo tracks, I don't necessarily turn it into a mono. But the farther down here I get, see, I have this shaker right here is panned to the right. And then I get into other parts and we start panning things around. But at the core of this, it's pretty centered. So here we go. So here's that shaker, it's more to the right. This is just a muted djembe, and this is really because I wanted something that wasn't a shaker or a hi-hat, and it works with this synthesizer down here.
It almost looks like it's the same instrument.
Yeah, it almost sounds like the piano I was using last night had a lot of key noise on it, and I almost wanted it to be that. And again, you're listening to 2 tracks, but I don't want you to hear 2 things. I want you to hear it as one thing, you know. I'm a little This is giving me some problems, but that's okay. Okay, so that's what we've got so far. We've got these kicks and snares, and then I've got some transition effects. Like some of them are booms, like because I want everything we do with Tasha, even the non-quote worship songs, I want them to be wide and emotional like a worship song. They ought to evoke some kind of emotion. And that's another thing I'd say, like, if you want to produce music, what do you want them to feel as they, like, that's the thing to guide most of it. And, you know, if it's emotional, it's wide, like, it may have less groove, it may be more swimmy, you know, it may swim around the image if it's supposed to make you not bob your head, like, you know, or feel some kind of joy or, I think what, if you want it to be really groove heavy, like what do you do to make you feel that? You know, like I'm guiding what it does emotionally the whole time. Do I feel the thing that this song is supposed to make you feel when you hear this? So yeah, we have, so this emotionalness that we're going for, these transition effects, this is leading into chorus 2. I've got these kind of things that you may not even hear, but you feel them. So that's what just the one sounds like. And then the two. Add these to it. So like this, right? Sometimes I'll use different kick drums to get the track to skip a little bit, or to feel like you're kind of, it jogs, or it has a bounce to it. And so, this one, like just a little weight to different things. You're never going to hear that, but you feel it, you know.
Color changing.
Yeah, it's a slight color change, and during the mix process, I spent a lot of time deciding if what I added is really necessary. I do a lot of taking away while I'm mixing. If it doesn't have to be there, if it doesn't add something, if that skip doesn't make it feel a certain way, I take it back out. You know, and so add to that these other loops, and this is where I might have taken, I think I took this loop from some kind of loop loft library, and I moved things around to get the rhythm to happen the way that I wanted to, but so you get in here. So if I put those toms with these transition effects and kick drums, you get a sense of like the lows and the low mids of the drums. Kind of cool, like you know, they're all doing something, and I'm just paying attention to what frequencies are in the way from one another. The crispness of the transients as you record them, when I want things to hit all at the exact same time, if stuff starts getting mushy and I can't tell, that affects, when you hear a pop song and it's really crisp and there's something just so clean about it, they've really cared for that well. They make sure that things hit exactly at the same time, unless they don't want them to. So let's see what else I've got. Okay, so I'll add all of this right here so far. So what's being added right here are this dirty snare drum. So I've got the claps and the snaps and stuff in there now, and then you come into this section, you've got these claps right here. And these tambourine drums. You hear the verb. And again, it's not that you even hear it, you may, but you don't even hear the front note because there's so much going on, but it's that trail. And so much of pop music, if you think about it, is so minimal right now. Like it sounds like there's three things. There's a synthesizer, there's an 808 bass, and there's a snapper clip. But if you start listening to all the little effects that are kind of coming in, is that a vocal that they chopped up and put a reverb on? Is that a tambourine that has a trail? Is it a drum like this that has a weird something on it?
Do you remember what reverb you used on that? I know you've already processed it, you already printed it, but.
No, it might have been, I use a lot of wave stuff. I have all the Universal Audio plugins and all the waves things. And Manny American has a delay that it's delays with distortions and phasers and things. And then I might have gotten that sample somewhere that did that. You know, I don't even really recall, but the Valhalla reverbs are like $50. They're vintage verbs, like really cheap, and you can hear it all over everything. Excuse me. Okay, so then we hop into this djembe that's right here. This sonar noise happens in the verse that actually just got taken out. So I was told that radio's really tired of snaps in the verses, like verby snaps that happen in between phrases. So if you could take the snap out and replace it with something else. Okay, that sounds like a dumb thing. And the radio guy's like, I can't make this stuff up. I'm just telling you, a couple big stations told me they're tired of snaps. So that's what I put in place of a snap. So here's the snap. They're like, they don't like that. They might not play the song because of that snap. All right. And then they're like, it doesn't, the sonar is what I call this, you know, whatever. It just sounds like someone dropped something on the floor. Well, they might have. But the only thing I got is a snap, so we just took it all out. So there's no snaps or things dropping on floors in the first verse. So we get into the rest of the top end of this track, and we also have like cymbal swell, like those low end, those booms and stuff. A cymbal version of that is a cymbal swell, you know. And then, so we hop in here. Oh, I'm not playing the other stuff. Then we get some things on the downbeat, crash, and cymbal effects. Don't even know what that is. Very insignificant. Now this is all I had for a minute. Actually, there's this loop that happens in the verse here, right here. I'll play this for you.
That almost sounds orchestral, like a symphonic.
There's a lot of, you know what I realized? I used to spend so much time just wishing I was just like my favorite producers and being bummed that my stuff didn't sound like them. And then I realized one day, but I bring something unique to this conversation. What do I do? Well, that guy is kind of classical, and I don't know how to know it. And so I started leaning into what made me unique, and that's been a really good thing. And so yeah, we started talking classical. Like I love rhythm and I love groove. So some people, their groove might just be a kick and snare. I have a lot of stuff that hop. I have a lot of stuff that on like the 16th kind of hops and makes it feel kind of unique. So I've got this little loop happening in the verse. It's all about how you blend it. How high is this loop and how hard does it make you skip? Is this to be boom, 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 or is it boom, boom, boom? You know, it's all in kind of how you blend those things. And so what I just played for you is, this is how it sat for a minute. All this stuff in the chorus with the. And then one day, I tried this, and so I added this loop right here, again with the skip kind of thing. So listen to it without it again. Just kind of goes right along, then you add this one loop. Like, I love that kind of stuff. It happens a lot. And then I added just a little bit more, as if I didn't have enough symphonic kind of stuff, these taiko drums from like a Hans Zimmer library. Yeah, rods on metal. And then these swells into the chorus, this actually put timpani in it. So that's the drum treatment. Any questions? All right, I'll keep going. So in the second verse, well, back to the first chorus. The first chorus is kind of scaled back. Let me play that for you. Yeah, what's up?
When it comes to time for live performance, how do you figure out, like, okay, I'll do that particular part in the loop. Maybe I'll have the drummer or whoever play some of those parts of those stems physically real live. Is that a process you go through?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say one of the things I learned from Toby is we'll do 3 weeks of rehearsals before a tour, and many days of that is him out in the room listening to the tracks. You know, I mean, there's 9 of us on stage. It's not like we're not playing a ton of the music, you know, but there'll be claps or hey, you know, things that like, things that's a little harder to create live. You're like, man, turn that hey up. You know, things that'll make the room respond a certain way, or a big clap with a verb on it. Man, make that a huge moment. And so we adjust. Just because the balances are right on a live record isn't going to mean it's going to translate in the room. So he spends a lot of time on that. And so, you know, it's a bit of a balance. And then sometimes we just take stuff out. Man, that loop, that's making everything sound muddy in the house. And so we'll just take that tambourine out, you know. So it might be, if it's a live drum kit, you know, sometimes some of those like stomps and big, we want the low end to sound like the record did. And so we'll keep more of the low end in the track. Some of those claps, we might opt to make it sound more like a real drum in the room. And so we'll take those out. As well. It's whatever it needs to feel the right way. We want to feel like the spirit of the record, but we want it to sound like the live. Like Toby's record sounds so weird to me now because I've heard our live versions 500 times, you know, and that's the way those songs sound to me now, and it's different. So yeah, but I do want as many people live playing them as possible. So I don't. If it's a very unique sound that creates the synth hook, and if it's a layer of 4 sounds, we'll actually just we'll chop up the live recording and sample it on the keyboard we're playing it, so it sounds the exact same, but it's actually played by somebody, and then it gets taken out of the tracks and things like that. So,
That's a good question.
yeah. So here's this first chorus. You.
Fall in your arms and stay here. I'm not gonna move, 'cause when I'm with you, I'm safe.
So you don't really notice the low end in this. Actually, I wanted you to hear as little as you could. I want to be very centered around the vocal. But there are 2 bass instruments that are happening here. So this is actually an 808. Those of you who want to know how to make hip hop, you know, or give a sense of it, 808 Warfare it's not a very expensive instrument, but it's all over pop music. Yeah. And so one of the tricks here to this song is so organic, and it's so, like, when I just let this be a piano and an acoustic guitar, and it sounded real, but it also didn't hit like radio needed it to hit in a pop kind of way. And so there's a couple elements in this track that bring modernness, a bit of modern. And so one of these is the 808. And so these are actually, and you also talk about the way it skip, you know, like the way a track bounces. You've got this 4 on the floor, but then the chords move in the middle of it. And then we've also got this sure that your just the different sounds aren't out of phase. Check your phasing back and forth, moving things, see if it works, and seeing if there's actually any need for the thing that you've got. Sometimes bass can be so smooth that all you do is hear it, and the frequency doesn't rise up high enough to hear it, or hear it on laptop speakers and things like that.
Josiah, you had a question?
Yeah, is it possible to zoom into those two? Because I'm just curious of what it looks like. Because it's making those. I'm just curious of what it looks like.
You're hearing that tick.
Yeah, so you can see this. You can see this front end of it like that, where it hits, got that metallic kind of sound on the front end, and then this bottom one has far less of that.
Distortion almost.
Yeah, and there's that. And so then this second verse is very similar.
To try.
Oh, well,
I'm meant for the lesson words. There's no need.
Sam, I want all to be about the vocal. What can I do in these subtle ways? And so I have this, actually has a gate.
What's driving the gate?
These used to be side chains where you would send out a signal from the bass drum, and that would trigger a compressor to dip the signal down. And now they have just plugins that do it. So, yeah, there's Waves has one called One Knob Pumper, and it just on a quarter note does it. You can adjust how fast it moves.
It locks to the session time, doesn't it?
Yeah. There's one called Kickstart that'll actually, you can draw rhythms and stuff for it to gate different kinds of ways. And so that's what's doing that. So then you come into the chorus, and I wanted what you haven't heard yet. You heard, so this is in the verse. And then the chorus, the gate stops. Well, first you hear a filter that opens up, and that was automated and then printed. Actually, the filter's right there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one knob filter, So it starts to open up. So that's what the bass sounds like without the gate working and things. So add that. So here's the rich lows part. The rich lows track right here adds the top end of the bass that you need to actually hear it, not just feel it, but hear it.
Second octave.
Yeah, and then you've got the A. This is still the majority of the. Like I said, if you get drums right, you can hear how much real estate the bass is actually taking up, just love when the low end is right. Now then, this is probably the most unique thing that happens in the chorus. It's like a pluck that it's kind of woody, and then this. I would guess this wasn't. Sorry, I would guess this wasn't used. It's just not doing that much. Sorry, guys. Well, you're awake now. Seriously. So this is the bass treatment, and then I'll add the drums back in. So there you have it. So let's go to keys real quick. So we've got this sound, and then this pedal sound is so I can kind of add in how mechanical and maybe imperfect the piano is to sound.
What piano is that? Tell them what it is.
That's Keyscape. That's been tweaked a lot. There's a multi-band compressor all over it, and EQ'd and stuff. And then this, I'll go down here. This is from the original track. There are a few tracks in here that were from the very original version. This is one of them. This is leading into the chorus. So I'll start here with like effects kind of things. Turn all these on.
So guys, in my intro class, remember we talked about how you have to go deep with your stacking simple ideas. This is a great example of that. Little elements stacked.
Yeah, little bits. They're all, again, I might have 4 different synths going together, but I don't want you to hear them 4 different things.
Right.
So sometimes I'm going to stack them like more like a big band, to where the trumpets are up here, but then here's the saxes, and they overlap the bottom trumpets. And then they start to, and then trombones actually layer the first couple voices on top of trombones. Sometimes they're actually different parts. This synth is bright and it's up here, and then this middle one, and then there's a low middle one. And then sometimes when I want things more open, I might voice the synth more instead of like a closed voicing. I'll open up the voicing here, and then I want a thinner or a thicker sound on the same thing, and I actually copy down those notes into the next thing, and I'm simply looking for a different frequency range to complete a very warm synth sound. But I'm layering the exact same notes, and I have 3 or 4 different ones, and that especially, you shouldn't hear those as 4 different synth things and a lead thing here and this and that. You hear, there's multiple tracks, but you hear them as one part. So to support this, we've got this rope. See? And I've got this organ. I love that's a real one. That's my real one. I love sounds and noise. I don't like everything being so corded. There's this plugin called RE20. I can't remember who it's made by, but it simply adds like tape warble, and sometimes it'll be really slow. And I put it on piano sometimes. Like the track just sounds kind of stale. It's too perfect. It's too in tune, and I'll just add, or it adds noise to things. I like when things aren't so perfect, and so in fact that's what I did to the main guitar. The main guitar had all kinds of warble in it, so it stopped sounding so perfect. And so this patch is just droning behind it. It's just like flutes and stuff that you don't hear it, but I just don't want the track to sound so perfect. Same thing here. There's more. Yeah, so between these are all. I do far more than just playing around chords with the pads. I find myself doing like single note things. Like one part is a single note on top in the range that I want to cover. And then there's another part with a different sound that almost actually a different instrument. That is, maybe it moves around the chords a little bit more down here. But that's how I kind of think in that respect. And then this is along with that 808, that sub 808, this is the other touch of modern that I wanted the track to have. It's got put a little gate on it too, not very much. That pumper, just like a good bebop or whatever. It's got the upbeat is more accent. The dun dun dun.